Welcome to Be Held's podcast, What's Your Story? Where lyrics are more than just words. I'm Giselle Inez, your host, a licensed mental health counselor and model, guiding you through the journey of self-discovery and authenticity. Join me as we explore the heart and mind of an artist. This podcast is a safe space where your vulnerability is your superpower.
We can all relate being an overthinker, for sure, but what is overthinking in your world sound and look like?
Predicting your life without experiencing it. That's kind of how it feels. And it is very... You just feel stuck. It's kind of paralyzed feeling. And as cliche as they always say, I mean, it is all in your head at the end of the day, but it doesn't feel like that in the moment. And it's really hard to get out of that because even when you try to come up with solutions, your brain finds a way to counter argue what you're trying to fix. And it's kind of just like, I always view it as a web. And every time I've gone to therapy and try to talk about it or talk through it, I think that's what makes it so hard because, as I said, was you're kind of just entangled, and there's no real solution to it, which makes it a really difficult situation to be in.
So when you're saying that you're trying, if I heard you correctly, your overthinking is more so trying to control the outcome and getting there. Like, it's like this is how you want it to look, feel, sound throughout this entire process, and this is exactly the outcome that you want at the very end. Yeah, that's a lot of energy and effort to put into that control when we don't have that much control in a lot of circumstances.
Nothing. And I think this was a topic I really struggled to push through, especially like throughout the early years of my life, say high school especially. I think talked about it a little bit in Addicted, but just not being able to separate, I guess, reality from fiction, because the fiction becomes the reality at some point.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, you fixate on ideas, you fixate on how you think life is going to be sequenced.
Yeah.
And because of that, you start to feel like you're living that way, when in reality it isn't truly how it works, and it's not truly how life works. I mean, like I said, like the topic I always struggled with was just not thinking everything was predetermined. There was no room for life to just ebb and flow. It felt like
calculated.
Life was already calculated. I knew how it was going to end. And
yeah.
It's just not a great way to approach life either, because I think a lot of the fun in life, all the best memories I've had were essentially surprises. I think it's moments that you least expect. It's moments that you don't predict.
Yeah.
I've always had the best times and the most memorable experiences.
I love where this is going because my girlfriends and I, we created this mantra, which is now a lifestyle. And it's, we always say now, and now we firmly believe it, it's better than we could ever imagine. And that has helped me as an overthinker to let go of, like, I don't really know what to expect and how this is going to end up, but it's going to be better than I could ever imagine. And that has kept me grounded and made me loosen my grip on things I really wanted to control.
I like exactly what you said, grounded. I mean, it's a great word for it, because I think the solution, at least in my opinion, is learning how to be present.
Like in your body.
And that is always the hardest thing. I firmly believe it's the hardest war always is with yourself.
Yeah.
Because your mind is really good at fighting yourself and learning how to kind of just tame that. I've always said I don't think there have been issues externally with people, but I don't think anything is harder than dealing with what's going on internally.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because overthinking is a coping mechanism to protect ourselves, right? Exactly. We're trying to find all the answers to feel like we're behind the wheel, you know, but most of the time in life, sometimes it's okay to be the passenger and let,
well said, yeah.
You know, let things flow. And so what was going on in your life, or what inspired you to write Overthinker?
Yeah. Out of all the emotions I'd say I've experienced, I think overthinking is by far the most common. And I really wanted throughout the song to capture it in my sense, how that feels. Could go over how I kind of express that, or how I try to do that in a song structure way. But in the intro, like I said, I like to kind of treat it as it's kind of just like a war, like a battle with yourself. And it's really sad because I think a lot of people, you know, no matter how hard they try, they don't make it on the other side. And I think it's very just important as human beings. I think we always want to connect with others, and this song is probably the main reason why I wanted to make this podcast, because there's no better way than connecting with others than being vulnerable with each other. And
oh, absolutely.
I think just spreading that vulnerability kind of gives that person a safe space, and the whole goal is to kind of make that chain reaction.
And what I'm also hearing is it's sometimes really difficult to connect with others if you're not connecting with yourself first. And so
exactly.
I think it's just so important that, yes, you are creating this wave of vulnerability and opening that door of connection. However, it always starts with connecting back to yourself. And like, for someone who's listening to this episode right now, what does connecting to yourself look and feel and sound? You know, what's that narrative sound like?
Something I was always stubborn about is not understanding the importance of positive self-talk. And I never believed its power, its impact, because you hear it and it sounds so fictional, and you know, but it is so true how important it is with how you view yourself. And the way you view yourself externally affects the people you meet, the energy.
Oh, absolutely.
And the law of attraction, like, that is so important, and try to live every day to just remind myself. The first thing I get up is to just look in the mirror and remind yourself, you know, I'm here, I have purpose. There's, you know, for people that don't see that yet, I think we talked about in a previous episode how important delayed gratification is. So many things in life take time to figure out.
Yeah.
And that is so hard to understand in a culture, especially. I think our generation struggles with this the most, is, you know, like going back to just being present, how important that is, because there is so many things in life pulling, grabbing your attention that you don't have time to learn how to be with yourself, be in tune with yourself. And because of all these things pulling you, we kind of base our personalities off that stuff rather than figuring out who am I as a person.
Right. It's so easy to be like, I'm so busy, I don't have time to just sit in front of a mirror and say, I'm a good person, I deserve to be here, I like who I am, I like who I'm becoming.
Exactly.
And there is a hesitation because it's so hard to believe that and allow yourself to grow into believing that. I think that's the way I want to share that. It's, you don't have to believe it right away, like you said, the instant gratification, but you have to give yourself that patience and that time to build that trust and
Exactly.
give the space to create these new beliefs. And that definitely takes time and effort. And on days where you really don't want to do that are the days that you need to do it the most.
Well said. Yeah. And I think that not only goes with just helping yourself out from a personality standpoint, but from a skill standpoint, you see time and time again. I mean,
You're right. It's actually a skill.
it is. It's a skill.
You have to teach yourself this.
And within every skill, there are books that show the graph. I mean, you always hit a plateau, you know, and it always starts off exciting, but it dips.
Yeah.
And once you get past that dip with anything in life, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
It always gets better.
And so when you were writing this song, Overthinker, were you currently in a dip? Were you in a good place in your life that you were able to reflect back and share wisdom? Or was it, is this song more so like sharing a time of your life where you were like in deep pain?
Exactly. So as the album is titled Reflection, I think with this, as in like, and many songs I had written throughout this album, I wanted to reflect on these experiences and how they made me and how I learned to, like you said, grow through them. And it's a very pivotal point. Just learning how to fight through, and I think that's why the emotions really came out, because when writing these songs I really try to put myself back into that place I was at before learning how to deal with it and fight through it. And I think this was it's probably the hardest topic to write about, not only from a personal standpoint, but just knowing how many people I've known throughout my life and knowing how many people experience that. And I guess, is there certain lyrics you should go over? I think the intro, no, you will not win. I was destined for this. It was built in my soul. I can feel it within. Sensei said not to quit. You can push more than this. Never let them take over what you sought as a kid. And it's the question we always ask at the end of every podcast episode. You know, if little Brandon or the little version of you was sitting in the room,
Right.
how important it is to relook at that lens.
Absolutely.
Because that's the purest point of life you'll ever be in.
Right.
There's no real obstacles. There's no real quote unquote, I don't want to say excuses, but it's not like, you know, your brain really pushes away from these quote unquote fantasies or
Mm-hmm.
what you truly want to pursue. And while sometimes it may not be, obtainable in the moment, I firmly believe that there's always a way to reach those goals you wanted to set for yourself as a kid.
Yeah.
Um,
How would you, for someone who is listening to this, and what if they're saying, I have a really tough hand of cards that were given to me, right? I think it's so important to recognize too that there are opportunities that people are able to get to that point by connecting with other people and being in certain environments and neighborhoods, right? And if someone's listening to this episode and they're like, well, I don't know XYZ and I don't have these resources or friends or a teacher or someone to seek, like, how would they start? Like, what's their first step?
if you never really have anyone to turn to in the moment, I think this is where, you know, hope is a big proponent in things.
Mm-hmm.
Just finding something that keeps you motivated, keeps you pushing
What was
through
your
whatever's
hope?
going on. See, I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate I wasn't really dealt those cards. I mean, I think the people I've always personally turned to, I know not everyone can relate to this experience, is my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say some people turn to friends, but friends always came and gone throughout my life. But the people that I always felt I could share the most vulnerability with, and I think those are the people you should really seek out to, were my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go on at the end of the song how I appreciated both their perspectives on how they viewed life as well. And I think that's part of the reason I was able to keep pushing through, because of those different perspectives. But at the end of the day, they provided that hope to push through. And my sister as well, I would say, family bond is very strong, and they give me reasons not to give up, because I want them to see the journey of really just pushing through. And I think it's just very important to just keep striving to be, a better person every day. And
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful and such a blessing to have supportive people in your life. And for people who may not have that yet, big emphasis on yet, because you can always make that choice to find people who are in alignment with you, who see you and you see them. But what I'm hearing when you say hope is you have this vision and this journey of your life, and it sounds like, okay, one day I'm gonna come out with an album and I'm gonna share it with people, right? So even a hope like that is just so important to create for yourself and hold on to. That's what I'm hearing.
Exactly, yeah. And we talked about in previous episodes how important it is to be true to yourself. And I think by being genuine, being true to yourself, I think the outcome always ends up well. I mean, people, I think connecting, like we said, as human beings, we always want to connect, and by being true to yourself, you kind of start that chain reaction to inspire others.
Yeah, and being true to yourself. Personally, with me, it's a lot of like, well, my mom sees me this way, and my dad sees me this way, and my brother sees me this way, and they have these expectations of me. But is that how I see myself? Is that something I want to be doing? And those are questions you can ask yourself to connect more to, like, who am I? What do I like? Once you start kind of peeling the layers of, like, if you're an onion, like, of how the world says you should be, you get to start being curious of, like, is that me? Do I really want that?
No, exactly. And I really like the onion analogy, because that is essentially the hardest step, I believe, in anyone's journey, is figuring that out.
Yeah.
It is the most emotionally draining. It's very challenging. I mean, and as you stated, like, if you can't do it yourself, and you shouldn't, always find people that kind of fall in that inner circle. I always like to say this, like, kind of tree ring analogy, and it's not to view things in a hierarchy, but I believe there's layers of people you can be vulnerable with, and there's very few people, at least in my life, that I put in that very small core inner circle.
Yes.
And
the less people in that
how
circle
that is, yeah,
is very, very important.
Exactly. Because a lot of people, especially with this album and who we're trying to cater towards, is, people that haven't gone through the journey yet. They're kind of still in the middle of it, and they're at these hard kind of plateau stages of life. Because of a lot of societal expectations, you think you need more people. The more is the merrier, and the more people you have surrounding you, the quote unquote better you'll feel. But it's always quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
Always. And
it makes me think of how, going back to the tree, like, ring analogy, if you cut down a tree and you see the rings, right? What Brandon is really trying to paint this picture of is the smallest circle in the center, and how many people can fit in that small circle. And the less people, the better, because those are the kind of people that see, how do I say this, want the best for you. Like, the less influence you have on, like, what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, how you should sound, the more you'll feel closer to yourself.
And those people, as we talked about with expectation, there is never any expectation on one side or the other with those people.
Right.
They're just there for you at the end of the day. And how important it is to have those people.
Yeah. Less influence, the better.
Exactly.
Because your voice will be the loudest. Like, we already live in a really loud world where we're thinking about, like, our teachers, our bosses, our friends, our parents, our siblings, our partners. And when you, like, have a very small circle, it's like, okay, my voice is the loudest, and that should be it. I really liked when you were describing how overthinking looks and sounds to you and what you're experiencing, and how that is tied into this song. And so could you just repeat that one more time of the cadence and how it relates?
Yes, this was something I really wanted to capture in the first verse. It starts off kind of in like a singing way, and as you get to the second half of the verse, we kind of switch to rap, and I wanted to kind of capture what that feels like. I think we talked about a lot of times how paralyzing it is, and not just the subject matter in this verse saying, can't help but think of all the scenarios where I'm stuck up on the stage and all this lighting and helping just want to sulk in the shade. That's truly, at least for me, and I hope some of the listeners can relate, is how I view it and how it feels to me. It just feels like I always was like an anxious person growing up.
Yeah.
And I hated public speaking. So
a lot of people do, actually.
And a lot of people do. And that's essentially what it always felt like for me. It felt like when you're just randomly called up, like spotlight's on you, you got to present, and how terrifying that is. I really wanted to capture that because it's always in those moments where it feels like you have a lot to say, but you can't say anything.
Okay. Yeah. I see, you're painting the picture for me now of what overthinking looks and feels and sounds like to you.
Yeah. What about you?
Me? Okay. My overthinking is if you were sitting in front of a TV and you're watching like a show or a movie and you were able to just press fast forward and it's like fast forward times 2. So there's no audio and you're just seeing really fast motions on the screen. That is my overthinking. It's terrifying. Like how it's I can relate in the way of like I'm sitting there, but everything around me is moving really, really fast.
Yeah.
And it's actually just my mind that's going so fast, but physically I'm just sitting here. And it's just so interesting to see and hear how we all overthink so differently. Because in my head, for a very long time, I was like, oh, everyone overthinks that way too. Everyone sees it as like a fast forward movie scene. And you just want to always get to the end. Because you always want to find out, am I going to be okay?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Of all the scenarios that you're just creating in your mind in that moment.
It's funny you use the same word, terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like, that's... well, that just shows, like, wow, it may be different with how we experience it. Same exact feeling.
Right. It's this sense of wanting this control, and you don't have the control. So you're creating all these scenarios of trying to gain this control.
Exactly.
And so for anyone who's listening, we would love to hear and read about like what overthinking is like to you. And so like, for example, Brandon, what you said, you're like on the stage, spotlight, so many things you want to say. The words aren't coming out. With me, I'm sitting and it's fast forward times 2, sometimes times 4. It's really scary, of that movie scene just going really fast. But what it sounds like is that we both want to get to the end of how it turns out. And so what sticks out to me reading this, because we're talking about terrifying and like this feeling of fear that is just so consuming. I'm reading, I fear that I will never find the key to peace inside my brain. And that really relates to me, of like, I just want peace. I don't want this fast forward anymore. Like, I just want to be back in my body and find that peace.
The goal, in my opinion, is always to get back to that grounded state. Because I really like what you said about control. The only times I've really felt really scared in life is when you lose that.
Like, what's an example? Give us a time in your life where you felt like you lost that control.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes multiple times throughout the year. But I guess the
it
most
happens
recent,
all the time, actually,
yeah,
during the day.
yeah, exactly. I think the most recent one is, and I think a lot of kids my age can relate. I graduated. I look like I'm 12 years old, but I actually graduated college last last year, and I think it's really important to talk about the job market.
Oh.
It is.
Oh man.
It is horrendous
Yes.
right now,
Yeah.
and I'm very fortunate that I graduated last year because it got even worse. I think the year after, the people that are graduating this year, it's really scary out there, and I was like 0 for like 300 applications. Beginning of the year, I started applying like 9 months before graduation, and I had this whole plan laid out. And not only that, I'm a very just like type A person. Like, even when plan A doesn't work, I got plan B strategy, C, D, and I thought I predicted how things would lay out, you know. And yeah, it's maybe 300 applications later, denied. I really wanted to make it to Boston. Really love that city. It didn't work, and I really was close to just giving up. Like, yeah, I relate. I know how much it sucks to just be denied over and over and over again, and a lot of times you don't even get the answer to why you were denied, which makes it even worse. And that's overthinking in essence, because you don't even know what you did wrong. You don't know how you can improve, and that's when probably the most recent time I felt like I've lost that control. But fortunately, it was because of, and this is a very important lesson I've learned, is not to burn bridges, because you never know how important that person is going to be in the future. And that all boils down to just being a genuine person, because I was really struggling basically in this professor's class. So I kept visiting him for office hours, but instead of most of that time spent just having kind of a professor to student interaction, I noticed the Jordan Peterson book on his table, and I still haven't finished the book, but it's the 12 rules to life book, and I was big into just learning about Jordan Peterson that year, and started a conversation on that, and that just sparked a whole kind of philosophy conversation with this professor, and it got him to open up. So kind of boiling back to the whole concept of this album, like, what is your story? Like, how important it is. And I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but this is an important thing I want to explain, is just going back to how important it is to ask people about their story. Because if I didn't ask about that book, or it wouldn't have led to finding more about this professor that I didn't know really who he was, and I got to learn that, and because of that helped me get the job I was desperately trying to get throughout the year. I mean, and that just highlights kind of the whole cycle of that experience. You experience a plateau, but by just not giving up and being persevering and just fighting, like I want to say in the pre-chorus, is like, try to surpass with my might, but the obstacle's too high. Hard to make it to the light when darkness is what lives inside. That's what it feels like. It just feels like there's just an obstacle too high, that it's like a boss fight too hard. Like, you're just underprepared. You don't know what to do. But just by taking the time and not even you taking the time, but let life set its course. And showing up every day, things work out.
I love that you shared, you applied to like 300 jobs. You know, I think it's so important to hear those numbers and let people know that they are not alone, and that it is a process that absolutely is so discouraging. And to hear you say, like, you just have to try every single day. Just get up and try one more day, one more time, one more step.
Exactly, yeah. What about you? What is that last experience where you really lost control?
I think it's interesting because what I would actually like to share is my experience letting go of that control and letting go of that fear. And one thing about me is my faith has really helped me, my spirituality, in that sense of there's just something greater than me out there, and there's this energy that I have to match up. And so I see myself as a magnet in those times where I'm trying to gain control. Like, I really, like, for example, I really want to, if going back to your job example, I really want to hear back from this job. I could see myself at this job. I could see myself wearing these clothes, this and that. And the more I cling on to how it should be, that's how I know I'm the furthest from it. Because if I'm the one who is playing God, right? I think there's a fine line between goal setting and knowing what you want versus like playing God and being like, this is exactly how it's gonna lead up to that moment, and this is the exact outcome. And there is no room for any surprises or like, oh my God, that's amazing. I could never imagine this, right? And so when I'm in those moments of like, okay, I need to just loosen my grip, I go back into my spirituality and my faith of everything's going to turn out the way it needs to, and I'm capable of working through that. Like, I may not have all the answers right now, but I will be able to have those answers in those times where I need to overcome that obstacle. Because I genuinely believe as human beings, we are resilient and we're able to come up with what needs to happen during those times of struggle and adversity. And as much as we want to prepare ourselves before it happens, you're really just draining your own battery, because like you're wasting your energy on those moments. And so I come back to, okay, like I'm safe right now in this moment, like sitting on this couch with Brandon right across from me. I'm not going to think about what's going to happen next week. I'm not going to think about what's going to happen tomorrow. And so when I find myself overthinking and trying to predict the outcome, I come back to the present moment, like I was saying, like, where am I exactly? It's like, okay, right now I'm sitting in this chair talking to you. I'm not thinking about tomorrow. I'm not thinking about what's going to happen the next hour or next month or in 5 years. And I come back to, I start listing what I'm grateful for in the moment, right? And it's like, I'm really grateful for breathing fresh air. I'm grateful that I have clean clothes. I just go from like the most basic needs of like, I'm grateful I have clean socks. I'm grateful I can walk with 2 functioning feet. And then it goes on into like who I love and giving myself compassion, right? I think to even go more specific, which I feel like a lot of people can relate to this, is gaining weight and feeling that loss of control. Mm-hmm. And so recognizing, like, this is a past conversation I just had with myself a couple days ago, when I realized like none of my pants fit, and I felt very much like Regina George in Mean Girls. She was like, these are the only things that can fit me right now. And I was telling myself, this past year and a half has been so chaotic and so crazy, And instead of beating myself up for gaining weight, what I can do is showing myself compassion of your body has gone through so much this past year and a half, and you've been focusing on, improving your mental health and improving your relationships with your friends and your family, and really prioritizing things that, are more important than, maybe sizing up to pant size, right? And when I talk to myself in that way of, hey, let's not be so mean, you're trying your best in what's really important, and that's the quality of your life, not those two pant sizes. So I think that's how I let go of that control, and I come back to, okay, where am I right now? Because that's all I have is right now in this moment.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said. I just want to transition a little bit to Western philosophies. I love yin and yang. I just love the concept of that and how important that is like you said, you can't always be in control and you can't always be out of control, but there's like a balance of the two. And it's in an ideal sense, I mean, this goes with like equations or just anything in life, it's impossible to achieve equilibrium in life. I mean, there's no true way to balance friends, family, career. There's just so much on a plate on a daily basis. But it's important to understand the concept of being comfortable being in the unknown, but not pushing yourself too far where you can't come back. But you can't also live life, very type A controlled. You kind of need that balance of the two, and with the two is how I truly believe you progress through life. And
I love that, because when you were painting that picture, it brought me back to my visualization of, I think of a pizza pie, and I think of each slice as like, this slice is my career, this slice is my friends, this slice is my family, this slice is my body, this slice is my sleep. And when I think about each slice and like how much energy I'm putting into them, like what the goal in my life right now moving forward is, okay, I'm gonna put 2% in that slice, and 3% in this slice, 3% in that slice. And if I just increase the percent of each slice little by little every day, that's how I know I'm finding that like balance in my life.
Really well said.
And
it's a skill in itself.
Yeah.
You don't just figure this out the next day.
Exactly. I'm not going to put
Everything
100% in one slice, because all the other slices will be zero.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I think as Thanksgiving is coming up,
Yeah. Food and gratitude.
the last section of this song is probably the most important section throughout this whole album, because while we can always express, I made it through this, I made it through that, you always have to remember who brought you there and how important it is. It takes a village. Exactly. No one is an island in life, and that's what I wanted to remind not only myself, but the listeners as well. And yeah, the outro of the song is literally just being thankful for people. And from my personal experience, I can just go through the list. I'm thankful for you, Mom. You showed me how to fight and grow some balls. I'm thankful for you, Dad. You showed me how to think and grow through flaws. Including my sister and including my grandparents. My mom and my dad are, the crux to how I became the person I am. And as we were saying in the beginning of this episode, how important it was to have two different perspectives on life. Because, but not only by having two different perspectives, I think that kind of helps in finding your own perspective throughout life, is getting these multiple stories, multiple experiences. You kind of just take a little bit from each person, and that's what kind of makes you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wanted to thank my sister. I want to thank my hedgehogs. I wanted to shout out the hedgehogs, because
The hedgehogs
they're
are
awesome.
the best.
And rest in peace, Mochi. That was the OG hedgehog. From a musical standpoint, I want to thank my grandparents as well. I'll never forget. I think I've always been a cautious kid. I've always been scared. But they were the first people that made me step out of my comfort zone. I think the story they always say is when I was like 3 or 4, my parents would always drop me off at their house, and I'd spend like the weekends with them. And they had me try hand painting for the first time. And instead of, me just kind of figuring it out, I just remember them dumping my hands in that mixed pool of paint, and just seeing, they say the horror in my face when I look back at my hands.
Like, no paintbrushes?
And blue. And I think that's just always an important lesson I look back on, because just a lot of things in real life relate to that. And going back to that yin and yang kind of experience, how important it is to just be like, I don't know where this is going to take me, but I'm going to try. How important it is to just try. And the last 2 lines, not only were just, thanking about personal people who made me who I am, and I owe the world to them, but the people listening to this, please spread the word, how important it is to remind someone that gratitude, it goes such a long way to just compliment someone,
even a
stranger,
yes.
in the slightest bit. You make their day. You don't know what a person's going through.
Yeah.
How important that is. To be positive, to spread love. That's why we're on this planet. And to the listeners, that's what kind of the whole concept of the album is, not only to share my story, but as we said many times, to share your story and ask people about their story.
Yeah.
So are there other people in your life that kind of make you, or
Oh, absolutely. I can
fight through things?
100% relate to, I would not be the person I am if I hadn't connected with all the people I have connected with. And family, for sure, is a big support. And I'd also like to share the other side of the coin of, lately I've been really practicing to show myself gratitude and show myself that I am loved, and I'm going to continue loving myself, and I'm grateful for all the things and all the decisions I've made to get to this point in my life. Because I think so many people can also relate to that. It can feel really lonely sometimes, and when it's really difficult to, when you're starting to list everyone that you're grateful for and the last person is yourself, that's that was a big turning point in my life, where I was always last, and I think now I'm practicing to put myself first. And so in the season of Thanksgiving too, let's also put ourselves first on that list and be like, I'm grateful for me. And it goes back to this, to your album and to your mission of putting yourself first, reflecting on your story, reflecting on your life. And so comment below on who you're grateful for. And if you're grateful for yourself first, that's amazing in a world where we are deemed to be selfish if we put ourselves first. But I'm really encouraging all of us to do that too.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the Ripple Effect of Empathy on Be Held's podcast. What's your story? Together, we can continue to create a world filled with genuine connections and heartfelt stories. Click the link below to continue this transformative experience.